Well, it's been Christmas and it's been a new year. So as John Lennon says, what have you done? So a lot of people, when the new year comes around, they think about the next year and they think about what sort of change is going to happen in the next year, what change can they bring about and what change would happen to them. And if you watch my previous video that was put out just after Christmas, you would know that I kind of don't believe in short-term goals and short-term changes. So rather than think about what's going to happen in the next year, we really should be thinking about the trend and what's going to happen in the next decade or the decade after that. So it's the trend that we should be looking at rather than just the next year that's turning around, because everything's changing and it's all about changes. And the main thing that I've learned is to be able to change, I've had to look at things from a different perspective. So I spent my first decade and a half living a farm. No water, no electricity, no plumbing. And it's kind of vastly different to the life that I'm leading now. And when I was a kid, I would have no inkling, no idea of what the wide world is all about. And the things that I experience now, that I see, I would have had no inkling of when I was a little kid. So as a little kid, you only see so much. And as you grow up and you get more life experiences, you see a lot more. And based on what you see and what's happened in the years before, hopefully we can have a bit more appreciation of what's likely to come, the changes that are going to happen. And there are some changes that we make happen, and there are some changes that happen to us and happen around us. They're the things that we can't really help. The changes that we make to ourselves, we can take little steps, and as we can see from the lives that we have achieved so far, it's the little bits that we do every single day that has made the difference from where we used to be to where we are now. So I'm going to tell a little story about change. And that's the change that I've seen in the type of roofs that we are putting up today. Because the roofs that we put on today are totally different from the roofs that we used to put on decades and centuries ago. And are the roofs that we put on today better than the traditional roofs that we used to put on? What has changed? What is going to be the trend into the future? Now, to try to answer that question, we've really got to go back to a roof. What is the purpose of a roof? And I think most of you would be right in saying that a roof is to keep the weather out, right? It's to keep the sun away, and it's to keep the rain off, and it's to provide you some sort of shade from the elements. So let's say in the real old days, all you had were logs and leaves. So what you did was you put a lot of leaves onto logs shaped in a pyramid, and it was the beginning of the so-called thatched roof. So a thatched roof is quite effective because of the steepness of the roof. The material didn't have to be anything fancy. All they had to do was to be thick enough to prevent the water from seeping right through, because the water was shed down the slope of the roof, and the roof was born. And as we got smarter, instead of grass, the thatched roof, we invented better things that were more waterproof. So tiles and slate, for instance, that were pieced together and basically installed in the same sort of shape, right? They didn't have to be totally waterproof. All they had to do was to be lapped sufficiently enough that it was shedding water. So the roofs would shed water, it would provide shade, and it provided protection against the elements. And this is the way that we have built roofs over the last centuries. So the question now is, if we can look ahead to the next century and the century after that, what will roofs look like? So we're going to go all the way back to basics. Initially, roofs were shaped like this so it could shed water, right? So nowadays, most roofs retain that shape. And when you look at a house from the street, you see part house and part roof, because almost a third, or in sometimes even a half of the house, is composed of the roof. So from the front of the house, you see the living area and then the roof. And the roof and the living area formed the house. Now, from a logic point of view, a house is meant to be lived in. So you are wasting a lot of the house in a roof because you don't live in the roof. So it's quite an illogical concept to have a home that is predominantly a roof. So why don't we build homes that are more living area and less roof? So when you look at a house from the street, you see the living area and you can hardly see the roof. This is actually what's happening. Now, I live in the Strathfield area here in Sydney, and it's quite a developed suburb. And because it's quite a wealthy suburb, there's a lot of people buying in, and they are tearing down all these old houses and putting new houses in. And I walked down a local street the other day, and I could hardly believe the change in the last few years, because houses have been taken down and new houses put up, but the houses are completely different. They are what is called modern houses. And if you haven't caught on yet, the modern houses are all boxy in shape. They don't have that triangle anymore. They're all flat. It's all square pieces, right? And you can hardly see the roof. It's all living area and no roof. So let's have a look at what's happening here on this typical street here in Strathfield. There's 3 old houses that used to have terracotta roofs on it, the typical triangular roof. Now they're all gone, and they've been replaced by new houses, and they're very expensive houses, and you can't see the roof. So what's actually happening? So I go on Google Maps and I think I should look at one of the newer suburbs in Sydney. We'll go out to a place called Riverstone, for instance, and we'll look at how the new houses nowadays are being put up. And I can see that tradition still rules, right? It's hard to get over tradition. So a lot of houses are tile and the typical triangular shape. But you can go down this street, for instance. You look at the left, and it's got the traditional homes, brand new almost. And you look at the right, and all the houses on the right-hand side, you can't see the roof. So there's a street in Riverstone, brand new subdivision. On one side you see the traditional roof, and on the other side you'll see what I think is going to be the roofs of the future. They are all going to be flat roofs. And if you know anything about commercial roofing, the big factories out there, they've all got flat roofs. And the reason is because it's economical. There's a lot of things about flat roofs that make a lot of sense. And I think the current trend towards flat roofs is because it's logical. Because a flat roof does all the things that a traditional pitched roof provides, but it also provides a lot other additional benefits. And the main thing is, rather than a house that's got part living space and a lot of empty roof space, most of the living space is now the house, and the roof forms a very small part of the total house. So it's now more space efficient. You can do a lot more with space, and you can do a lot more with ventilation and the design of the house. And I think this is one of the reasons why all these modern houses haven't got roofs that you can actually see. They're all hidden. And if you can see the majority of the new houses that's got the flat roofs, what do you see on the roofs? Solar panels. And I think most of you would agree that solar panels is a thing of the future. In the future, every single home will have solar panels on it. And if you talk to a solar panel installer, the traditional pitch roof has limitations because there are only some sides that are facing the right direction, and it's harder to put solar panels on, and you can get less panels on. But switch that over to a flat roof, you can use the whole roof to put solar panels on. And on some of these new roofs, you can see that most of the roof has solar panels. So maximum amount of solar panels, maximum electricity generation. And that's one of the reasons I think why these flat roofs are going to be the roofs of the future. Now, mind you, some of these flat roofs aren't being put together properly. And the worst thing I can see about flat roofs are the ones that have no eaves, the one that the perimeter wall goes all the way around and you're stuck with box gutters. Some may like it, I don't. But it's quite easy to design and build new homes with flat roofs that have got eaves in them. And I think from a livability point of view, these are the roofs of the future. So in my 2 decades or so of roofing, this is the trend that I've noticed. The trend towards modern homes, more livable, and no roofs. Or none that you can see anyway. So the next time you drive around your suburb, I suggest you look at all the new houses, the old houses, and count the number of new houses where you can hardly see the roof. Now, these so-called modern houses are now changing the way that we look at roofs, what sort of roofs we should be putting on our new builds, and how we optimize for livability and for living space. What do you think?